An NFL insider has revealed the price of a contract extension for Dallas Cowboys star wide receiver George Pickens, and now it's all up to Jerry Jones whether or not he's going to pay the price. What's up, guys? I'm Matt Long. Welcome to Cowboys Football 365. If you're a fan of the Dallas Cowboys, hit that subscribe button. But getting into the news for today from NBC Sports, the Dallas Cowboys stole George Pickens. They sent a 2026 third-round pick and a 2027 fifth-round pick for Pickens and a 2027 sixth-round pick, and they are only paying the wide receiver $3.656 million this season. The Cowboys have not engaged in contract talks with Pickens or his representatives. That's coming from Ed Werder of ESPN. The franchise player designation for wide receivers is projected to be $28 million, and Pickens will likely get into the more than $30 million per season range on the open market. The question isn't whether or not the Cowboys can afford him, but whether or not they should pay that much for a second wide receiver with huge needs on the defensive side of the football. So, George Pickens was acquired from the Pittsburgh Steelers in the offseason in what looks like the best trade of the entire offseason and one of the best moves made by Cowboys owner Jerry Jones in the last couple seasons. George Pickens has been showing out in the NFL, especially part due to the Ceedee Lamb injury, but George Pickens is a great player, and he is showing why he is worth a contract extension. Right now, the Dallas Cowboys depth chart at wide receiver gets a little bit scary after George Pickens. I mean, if you were not to sign George Pickens to a long-term contract, you would be rolling out Ceedee Lamb, Jalen Tolbert, Ryan Flournoy, Cavante Turpin, who's mostly a gadget player, let's say, not really a full-time wide receiver, and acquired midseason last year for a fourth-round pick, Jonathan Mingo, who's now healthy. But right now, this wide receiver room could get scary in a hurry if George Pickens is not re-signed. The problem stated by NBC Sports, which they are correct to be stating, is, do you really want to be a team that is paying two wide receivers almost top of the market value? Now, the cautionary tale here is, of course, the Bengals with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is getting paid as one of the highest paid wide receivers on a per year basis in the NFL. And then T. Higgins is also making $28 million per year. And you have to wonder whether or not it's smart for the Dallas Cowboys to put themselves in a similar position. The Cowboys have been being called the Bengals of the NFC because they have an MVP caliber quarterback, a fantastic offense featuring two top of the line wide receivers, but a defense that is giving up points almost every single time they touch a football field. And it's putting the entire team playoffs hopes in jeopardy because the offense is great, but the defense can't keep up. So what the Bengals decided to do was they paid their MVP level quarterback, Joe Burrow. Then they paid the other two wide receivers, and everyone had questions saying, if the offense is already so good with Joe Burrow, or if Joe Burrow is so good, he should be able to win with any wide receivers around him. He shouldn't need Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Usually, the plan at quarterback is you draft a quarterback highly in the first round. While he's on his rookie contract, you spend a lot of money on the pieces around him. So then eventually, when the quarterback matures and develops, you're able to let those more expensive pieces go, and you draft cheaper guys who are worse, but theoretically, your quarterback is supposed to carry you the rest of the way. Now, that's not the way the Cincinnati Bengals did it, and the last part of that is you then pay a bunch of defensive players because as good as Joe Burrow or Dak Prescott is, they can't play defense. So you need to have a defense, and then you're going to hope your quarterback can absolutely carry you on offense. So that's what is the usual plan, but the Bengals decided to do it a different way. They said, we're going to pay Jamar Chase, we're going to pay T. Higgins, and now the Dallas Cowboys need to ask themselves, do they want to do the same thing with George Pickens? Because the defense is just as bad for Dallas as it has been for Cincinnati in the past, and George Pickens, I mean, even stylistically, they're pretty similar. You look at Jamar Chase versus Ceedee Lamb, they're guys that can line up anywhere, run any route, and pretty much do anything. And then you have the more X wide receiver, the guy who's going to catch the ball over someone's head, while at the same time, they can take a slant route to the house. That's what George Pickens and T. Higgins are very, very similar. But if we look at how much money these wide receivers are making, T. Higgins currently making $28.75 million per season. And NBC is projecting on the open market George Pickens will get a contract somewhere in the Garrett Wilson, A.J. Brown range of $32.5 million, and then A.J. Brown, $32 million. Also, throw DK Metcalf in that price range. DK Metcalf coming over via another trade done by the Steelers, but this time bringing DK from the Seattle Seahawks to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then all the other guys, some homegrown guys, some not. But what's important is if the Dallas Cowboys go ahead and pay George Pickens this amount of money, they are going to be strapped for cash financially. They have some first-round pick offensive linemen who are playing well, and they're going to want their money when they come up, and you're going to have to pay them their money because you have to keep Dak Prescott protected. So the question is, do you pay George Pickens that amount of money? And I know you don't want to not pay him because you already gave up draft picks for George Pickens. But the way I see it, you don't pay George Pickens because 2 years ago, when Dak Prescott was healthy in 2023, he was again playing like an MVP candidate. Ceedee Lamb was the only game in town wide receiver wise, and the offense looked amazing. Also, don't forget, we also paid Jake Ferguson, so there is another receiving threat outside of, Ryan Flournoy, Jalen Tolbert, and all the other guys. All the other, pieces. They're pieces. They're not stars. They're not going to ever be stars, most likely. So you got to figure out, I would not be paying George Pickens because I pay Dak Prescott top of the line money. I expect him to give me top of the line results, and he has given me top of the line results. The offense this year hasn't been that much better than it was 2 years ago. And the way I would go about building this roster is I would go out and pay defensive players a lot of money. We have 2 first-round picks over the next 2 seasons. We can take another rookie wide receiver in the first round, get him on a 5-year first-round contract. All the first-round contracts in the NFL, they're 4 years with a 5th-year option, so we can get a young, talented wide receiver under a 5-year deal for significantly cheaper than George Pickens, and most likely they're not going to be as good as George Pickens, but you never know. They really could be as good as George Pickens. If we look at teams that have gotten themselves in financial trouble with top wide receivers, a couple of years ago, we watched the Vikings. They had Stephon Diggs. They didn't want to pay him. They replaced him with a first-round pick. That first-round pick was Justin Jefferson. At the time, you would say, no way this first-round pick is going to be better than Stephon Diggs. But then, surprise, surprise, he was. The next time that happened, the Tennessee Titans were owed a lot of money to A.J. Brown because he was coming up, deserved a lot of money. They decided to trade him for first-round picks. They picked Treylon Burks with that pick. Absolute flop of a player. They've already cut him. He tore his ACL. They already cut him. So it's a big risk to not pay George Pickens and try to draft his replacement, but the Cowboys already have the draft capital required to do that. They have 4 first-round picks over the next 2 years after the decision to get rid of Micah Parsons. And to everyone saying that it's too risky to let George Pickens walk, it's too risky to not put a defense behind this amazing offense. You got to at least try to build it the right way. The problem I have with the Cincinnati Bengals is every single year it's the same thing. It's the offense is great, the offensive line sucks, and the defense sucks. And Joe Burrow gets hurt every other year, and they go, how does this happen? Maybe it's because you don't build your team properly. So Jerry Jones has to at least try to build the team properly. And what this team needs is a defense around or behind Dak Prescott, who is an elite quarterback and is going to be able to win a ton of football games and score a ton of touchdowns with only Ceedee Lamb and only Jake Ferguson. Now, going back to our depth chart currently at the wide receiver position, Jalen Tolbert was a 3rd-round pick out of South Alabama in 2023. Hasn't quite lived up to that billing, but he has shown more this season than he's done in the past. And I think with Ceedee Lamb and Jalen Tolbert and Jake Ferguson, that could be enough to get away. That could be enough to get away with it. Like, you could score enough points with that, and then Kevontae Turpin could come in on the field stretching routes. You can run a couple nice little trick plays, little other plays with Kevontae Turpin. Jonathan Mingo, he's a blocker. He's a big dude. He's not going to actually make it in the NFL. And Flournoy, very exciting. Flournoy is a very exciting player. He, honestly, you can put him in the same Jalen Tolbert bucket where he could be that wide receiver 2, or if you spend that first round pick, a wide receiver 3. So I wouldn't go out and re-sign George Pickens, but very happy that George Pickens is here. He's going off. The problem is we are seeing in real time that no matter how good your offense is, if you have 0 defense, if you have statistically the worst defense in the NFL, you're not going to be a Super Bowl contender. Right now, this is a good team, but they're not a Super Bowl contending football team. And I'd love to see us contend. I'd love to see us contend for a Super Bowl, but we need a defense if we want to do that. And if you stuck around this long in the video, thank you for watching. Please hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel, and go Cowboys.